when they talk about residential schools and what was happening there with our children, my heart goes out. Of course, my heart is for the children. But you know what happened in them days? It was not Jesus. It was that evil that was inside these people that did that harm to our children. It was not Jesus. He's a God of comfort, God of peace, God of healing. So that's where my healing came from.
Welcome to 100 Huntley Street. Today we are marking the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. This day was informally known as Orange Shirt Day, and it honors the Indigenous victims and survivors from residential school. Canada has a rich history of Indigenous peoples and culture. As a matter of fact, right here in Burlington, where our studio is located, we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe. For those who don't know, because for many years, residential schools were not talked about. In the 1880s, Canada actually started funding residential schools, and the goal was to assimilate children into Canadian culture. The schools actually tore families apart, were rife with both physical and sexual abuse, put children up in poor living conditions. These residential schools stripped children of their culture, their language, punishing kids if they even spoke their native language. But today on 100 Huntley Street, we are sharing stories of resilience and miraculous stories of residential school survivors finding healing through a personal relationship with Jesus. And we'll share how churches are listening to the needs of Indigenous people to find healing. Joining me today is Adrian Jacobs, Senior Leader of Indigenous Justice and Reconciliation for the Christian Reformed Church. Adrian, welcome.
Good to be with you today.
It's so great to have you here. And you know, I just shared a land acknowledgement, which is our way of recognizing the land we're on. What is the connection that Indigenous people have with the land?
Yeah, one of the things that I know about our people is that land is really important to us. It's something that is more than just a thing. We have a relationship with the land. And one of the terms that we use for the earth is mother. And it's a metaphor. It describes the relationship. It's a caring relationship because as the earth provides for all of our needs, so did our mothers provide for our needs. And so that idea is our connection to the earth is that relational kind of idea. So that's what the land is to us as Indigenous folk.
It's so beautiful. And the way that Indigenous people care for the land is something I've always admired. Well, you know, the residential school system was church-run, so it was Catholic, United, Presbyterian, Anglican. And because of the harms done, it's been a difficult relationship between the church and Indigenous people. There's all those historical wrongs. But your role is to help facilitate that conversation, that reconciliation. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I work for the Christian Reformed Church. I'm the senior leader for Indigenous Justice and Reconciliation. And the church itself has been engaged with Indigenous folk going back into the 70s and even some desires back into the 60s. But one of the things that they recognized was that the residential school approach was not the most helpful way of approaching Indigenous community. Recognized the harm that was enacted on our people. So they decided to do something else and to approach it differently. And so part of their response was to work with communities in Winnipeg at first. And they knew that because of the effects, the intergenerational effects of residential schools, they knew that they had to be a place of healing, of inclusion, of well-being, of welcoming, helping people to not hear the rejection that the policy of assimilation gave to them in the residential schools, but the idea of Creator made you who you are, your language is good, your way of understanding the world is a part of who you are as a person, and it is acceptable as well. So in Winnipeg, they have the Indigenous Family Center there, and so the idea there is to bring people together and to deal with the effects of residential school by helping people accept themselves and accept their own language and accept their own family relations in order to find well-being back in community. Because as you described, they were taken away from families and tore families apart, but the effort there has been to bring them back together again.
It's so beautiful, the work that you're doing and the celebration of Indigenous culture. All over the world, we celebrate our cultures. And I see that as healing, too, as Indigenous people are able to embrace it. And we, the people who cause the harm, are able to celebrate it. Now you yourself are Indigenous. You're Haudenosaunee. And how does that relate to your faith? Because you've been a Christian since you were in your 20s. So how do you reconcile that within yourself?
Yeah. I grew up in the traditional community of my own people. And the kind of thing that I learned was the traditional understanding of our world and of who we are as people, including our bringing together of our people in the Five Nations Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We were referred to by others as Iroquois. And so this belt here that I have with me is an example of the long tradition of joining together. At one time, we were at war with one another within our own communities, and a peacemaker from the Wendat people came to our people saying, that's not what the Creator wanted us to do, and so he began to speak a message of peace. And in that message of peace, he emphasized the role of mothers and the clan mothers who chose the chiefs. There was a real understanding that this nurturing that our Mother the Earth was seen in the clan mothers. They had known the children. So they then said, we can choose the chiefs that will bring us together and to listen to the people, because the role of leadership was always to listen to the people and to be expressive of what they said. And so there came a time of bringing our people out of warfare into peace with one another. And this line between all of the various elements on this Hiawatha belt is actually a description of linking arms together. So when you link arms together, it's more than just holding hands. It's a strong relationship that you have with one another.
Yeah.
And so the idea was we're one, we're together. And it was a message of peace. And it was kind of like what Melchizedek did in the Jewish world, pointed the way to the coming peacemaker, the ultimate peacemaker. And Melchizedek was a priest and a king and served bread and wine, so prefiguring the coming of Christ. So our people understood the idea of peace. And so when we heard about Jesus and about him laying down his life for the community, we understood that already. Wow. That leaders among our people are those that give their lives for the others, for everybody else.
What a beautiful idea of leadership. And, I just want to say the work you're doing is so important. And we just want to honor you here at 100 Huntley Street, cheer you on, keep going. We're so thankful for you. We're so grateful for you, for that bridge building. So thanks so much for joining us today,
okay.
Adrian. Well, it gives me so much hope that we can share who the true Jesus is, the peacemaker, the one who laid down his life. We want to do that here at 100 Huntley Street. He's a God who gives us comfort, peace, and love. Roland Rendell is a residential school survivor who was a victim of regular sexual abuse, leading to a lifetime of pain. But that is not the end of his story. Take a look.
In that residential school, I slept on the top bunk. And there was someone that would come around and they would sexually molest me. And I remember just trying to pretend it away, like I'm asleep, it's not going to happen to me tonight. And so I'm just going to hope that it doesn't happen. But it would happen over and over again. And that was one of those things that Jesus walked me through in reference to my challenges with abandonment issues, with loneliness, with fear, with isolation. So God began to work on healing some of those issues in my life and identifying them and then bringing healing about them. That was one really pivotal moment in that whole process at the residential school. I remember as well the principal that was part of the high school at that point in time, which also was a part of that abuse that I experienced. I don't fully know for sure what happened to him, but I did hear that things didn't unfold in his life well. And I remember hearing that, and my heart went out to him, even though he was one of my abusers. Eternity lays at the doorway of everybody's life. And that was my biggest concern. I'm thankful that God gave me the grace to forgive. I'm thankful that he walks me through places of healing and wholeness. But there's still that ache in the heart of where's people going to spend eternity? Because it's real.
You know that is a work of God, that in ourselves, we can't forgive the horrors, the trauma, the terrible things that have been done to us without the work of God in our hearts. That kind of forgiveness that Roland shows, it's almost hard to believe, even caring about where his abusers spend eternity. It's so beautiful. And, you know, you may be walking a journey of forgiveness to someone who's done something absolutely unforgivable. And if that's you, we just want to provide you with a resource today. You know, it does take the power of God for us to be able to have compassion for those who have wounded us so deeply. We have prayer lines available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whenever you need it. Middle of the night, Christmas Day, those lines will be there for you. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444. Or if you don't want to talk to someone, just drop an email even. Say, pray for me. Help me. I need help. I need supernatural help with this. That's prayer@crossroads.ca. Somebody will pray for you. Or you can even go to crossroads.ca and just chat. Well, I want you to have hope because reconciliation is happening across this country. It's happening with individuals, as we saw with Roland, amongst organizations, within churches. But nationally, the National Chief of the Assemblies of First Nation is at the forefront of advocating for her people with the government. Now, we had the opportunity to sit down with National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepanak, her parents Loretta and Chief Garnet Woodhouse, to hear about the Christian values that her parents instilled in her and then her own healing journey. Take a look at this.
Joining me now is National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepanak and her father, Chief Garnet Woodhouse, former Chief of Penamutang First Nation, and her mother, Loretta Woodhouse. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
It is our honor to have you with us today. Loretta, first question would go to you. Your beautiful daughter is sitting next to you as National Chief, and I wanted to ask you what life was like growing up and what it was like to raise your daughter among 4 brothers, which is a very busy household. What was it like growing up for a National Chief, Cindy Woodhouse?
Well, first of all, I didn't know she was going to be a national chief, but it was a joy to have her. After 4 boys, we loved our boys very much. Every single one of them, when they were born, they were a blessing to us. And then when she came along, it was an extra special gift from God. So when she was growing up, she was very rambunctious. She was tough because she grew up with 4 boys, and the 4 boys made sure that they toughened her up. As she was growing up, you know, she had that nature in her where she would stand up for the less fortunate, so to speak. When she was in high school, I sent her off to another community, a short distance away, to go and have her education there, to finish off her grade 12. And there she would stand up for her people if they were being put down, so to put down as Native people. She stood up for them, and I am so proud of her for that, and who she is now, where she came from. She came from the roots of we were not wealthy people, but we have a lot of wealth in our hearts for God. God is our sustainer, and I taught her about the Lord. I try to set a good example for her, and to be respectful.
Chief Garnet Woodhouse, you were a chief for 4 decades in Penamutang First Nation, and you exposed Cindy to incredible moments of leadership. Was that intentional? What were you thinking as she attended events with you and really soaked in what it meant to be a community leader?
I never knew that she would be the national chief. But coming from my part, as my great-grandfather signed a treaty, and it carried on within our family. As my dad was chief, and my uncle, and some of my brothers were a council, and I think it's within the blood.
When you think about the spiritual legacy for your daughter and what you want her to inherit in terms of faith and relationship with Creator, what are some of the things that come to mind?
She heard a lot about Christianity when she was growing up. Yeah. And also and that's really supporting her today, because we need guidance as we do our daily things in this world. And also this is what the teaching she gained, not to say anything or to put down anybody. Like today we're living, I still encourage her today not to undermine other or to put down other faiths, the faith that other people have, because we all have different ways how we approach the Lord. I don't believe to put down other beliefs. Yeah. Because the Lord is not telling us that. He's telling us to love one another, not to put down each other.
Indeed, that message of forgiveness that we see modeled in the authentic Jesus, where he was willing to die for us and went through so much suffering at the hands of religious leaders, and yet God shows us to forgive. And when you, National Chief, when you think about the very dark history that is connected to Christian religious institutions and the idea of faith or Jesus that they shared, which was not what we see in the Gospels. It's not the Jesus we see who actually came to earth. How do you journey through as people of faith now in the authentic Jesus, but knowing how Jesus and the idea of who God is was used to harm First Nations people?
Well, it's certainly, it's hurtful, I think, for many of our residential school survivors when they think back, and many people were never brought to justice because it was people that hurt other people in using something as a weapon. And it was wrong and it was unjust. And, we continue to call for that people do be brought to justice that have hurt others in residential and day schools. And I know that they're hard conversations to have, but they're necessary. And I think that if, forgiveness can start by accepting that it happened, that this country accepts that it did happen, which I think most people do. I know there's some out there that are starting to say that that residential schools never existed. They did exist, and they hurt a lot of people. And I think the road to reconciliation is finding the truth through that and helping survivors find forgiveness and their descendants of having these hard conversations with each other and finding ways to come together in a better way. Finding ways to heal, being inclusive with each other. We're a big population in this country, and we're growing. And yes, we have a tough history with each other, even when it comes to treaties. The true treaty relationship hasn't been realized yet with each other. We have a long way to go. I know that we're working towards it. I think we've come a long way, but we have a way to go still. And we just have to continue to work together.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they talk about residential schools and what was happening there with our children, my heart goes out. Of course, my heart is for the children. And because I'm an educator as well, I see children and I care about these children. I love them. But you know what happened in them days? It was not Jesus. It was not the concept of Jesus, which people tried to label. It was God, or Jesus. It was that evil that was inside these people that did that harm to our children. It was not Jesus. It was not God. God is a holy God, and he when we allow Him to work in our lives, He does good things. He's a God of comfort, God of peace, God of healing. So that's where my healing came from. It's a beautiful life. Christian life is a beautiful life. And He's a forgiving God, and we forgive each other and we respect each other, because that's what He gives us.
Yes.
And that's what my grandmother taught me.
It's very profound, and it's very beautiful and true. I think about Jesus Himself being persecuted and murdered by religious leaders, and how people use religion as a tool, but it's from the evil intents of their hearts, and it is darkness behind it.
Yeah.
And it's so important to separate the two. I can see this stirring in your heart.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that I think it was a step in the right direction when the Catholic Church apologized for their wrongdoing in residential schools, and other denominations that have apologized. And I know that we have a long way to go with the churches in this country. I know that we have to acknowledge the truth.
Yeah.
To make sure that some of that denialism that is happening in this country,
right.
That we tell the truth. And I always think that if there's one thing from the church, it's to be truthful. And residential schools did happen, and residential schools hurt families, and residential schools hurt churches as well, because they're trying to, I think from First Nations and churches themselves, they're still. I think it's just starting off. It's still very raw. And I know going to Rome in 2022 was a real moment in time. It was a tough moment in time, but it was necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was necessary and of course, I know, the Pope visited Canada to give his apology. Some people accepted it, some people didn't. And it was very emotional to be around all those people in Alberta that day. Very emotional. You could feel the hurt, raw feelings, but also, some people were willing to forgive, others maybe not. And now where do we go from there?
Yes. I think speaking the truth and acknowledging the truth and pursuing true relationship and reconciliation and building together as National Chief, as you keep encouraging us to do. I'm so thankful for the authenticity of your family and for the encouragement this is for Canadians to do more work, roll up their sleeves and work together with First Nations communities. Thank you for your leadership, all of you as First Nations leaders. And National Chief, you were leading us at the National Prayer Breakfast. In a moment you came up and you asked your mom to say a prayer in Anishinaabe. How do you feel about your mom doing that right now to end our time together?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I think it's important, especially in the decade of Indigenous languages.
Yes.
And I know that we're always pushing, and I know that this country, and I'm glad we worked on the Indigenous Languages Act through Parliament. Yeah. There's lots of languages that are sleeping now, Indigenous languages that we're sleeping. We're losing our speakers. Every week we lose speakers. And so I'd be honored if she could close us off in that way, and that we say that so that our young people across this country can hear our language.
Yes.
Once again, right? And that we start to reclaim it and revitalize it. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. What an honor. Loretta, would you lead us in the Lord's Prayer in Anishinaabe?
Okay, let's all pray. Nusnang kichigishun kaya in kakichapitan tao kingisun kigichugi mawin tatagushnumagan. Migashna kuma kintapsko kichigishung. Mishnam sugisha pukashigan. Babunan tamashnam ni mani ninan. Kenin antidaska babunan tamadiman. Mitagan sham chagagati ni meni. Papishinam chimachisha bisining. Kintaskaya in kichugi mawin. Minamasko izin. Minokchito and taguzin. Kagige mino kagige misagish navak. Amen.
How beautiful was it to hear Loretta Woodhouse share the Lord's Prayer in Anishinaabe after years of Indigenous children being told they couldn't speak their own language. And I think it's a testament to the resilience of the Indigenous people in Canada to keep their language alive. Years ago, I met a young man from Alaska, and he was adopted into a family in the States, far from Alaska, and they believed everything about Indigenous culture was wrong, and he wasn't allowed to speak his language, and he wasn't even allowed to be called by his given Indigenous name. And so one of the things he used to do every morning was brush his teeth and say his name. Every time he brushed his teeth, in his mind, he would say his name over and over and over so that he would never forget. And that's the determination to keep it alive. And, we just want to support that. And I think it's important that we always acknowledge, what Chief Woodhouse said is it was wrong. What was done was evil. That was not a true representation of who God is or Jesus was. It wasn't right on any moral or human level. The abuse, the assimilation, the erasing of people's culture, the disrespect, telling them that everything about them was wrong. And, we have to bear sometimes some of the results that we see of that abuse and be agents of healing. That's what we're all about here today on 100 Huntley Street. And I just love how Loretta Woodhouse shares how Jesus has been a comfort to her and how she's been able to find healing, just like we heard earlier from Roland. And it's just a powerful testament about who Jesus is and what a relationship with him can be. Not the Jesus that was represented through residential schools, but the true Jesus, the one who laid his life down for all of mankind, no matter what we've done, who forgave us, who brings reconciliation. Listen, if you need healing today, if you haven't met that Jesus, or if you met the wrong Jesus, if someone who represented him did something evil, that is not who he is. And we want to introduce you to the one who loves you more than you could ever imagine. If that's you today, please call our prayer lines. It's a resource that's there for you. And I promise you, the most lovely, non-judgmental, wonderful people are on the other end of that line. And they would absolutely love to pray with you and introduce you to Jesus. It's a simple prayer. You can just say, if you're real, come into my heart. If you really love me, I want to meet you. I want to know you. Introduce yourself. Show yourself to me and see what happens. But that number is 1-866-273-444. You can also email us at prayer@crossroads.ca. You can chat at crossroads.ca. We just want to hear from you. And as people are fighting to keep their language, the good news is the Bible is being translated into heart languages. So Mohawk is a new language that the Bible was just translated into. And I know that when people hear about Jesus in their heart language, when they hear that good news in the language that speaks to their culture, their identity, it means something. And it's our prayer for Canada and for the church that we can keep these conversations alive and that we can continue to strive for reconciliation and that the healing power of Jesus would be realized in all of our lives. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing 100 Huntley Street. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.
Hello, I'm Kevin Shepard, CEO of Crossroads and Yes TV. I have some exciting news about what God is doing here, and I want to invite you to join our special community by becoming a monthly member. And here's why you should. Inspiration. Our content uplifts and inspires, and as a monthly partner, you help share the hope of Jesus with so many. Impact. Crossroads is more than media. We provide 1,300 prayer interactions daily, offering comfort and biblical resources, and your membership makes an eternal impact. Global missions. We respond to disasters and partner with NGOs for relief and rebuilding. By joining, you care for those in need. As a Crossroads member, you join like-minded community. You get exclusive content, friendly support. You can attend member events and stay informed. Becoming a member is simple. Choose your monthly level and payment method, and we hope you would join us, make a life-changing difference in people's lives today. Thank you for your commitment to our shared vision.